What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, October 23rd, 2018, getting into the week, and we've got lots to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and opinions. And just in going through my email inbox during the opening music to the radio show, I got yet another one of those scam emails. You know, we have secretly recorded you during your porn viewing sessions, and if you don't send us blah, blah, blah to this wallet address, we will email the video to everybody in your contact list. So, but it is a scam. Some of them actually have passwords. One of the ones I received had an old obsolete password I don't actually use anymore. So the scammers definitely have access to stolen data that links your email address and password. All right, getting on into the news here. I want to start the show today talking about the migrant caravan. And there's definitely a crisis on the way here. And I want to send out a warning. There is already a lot of fake news being sent around about this. And earlier today, there was a story claiming that last night Trump signed deployment orders for the 82nd Airborne Division of the U.S. Army to deploy to the U.S. southern border in Mexico, to deploy from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, along with the 1st Armored Division of the U.S. Army at Fort Bliss, Texas. And this story went on out there. It originated with Al Turner. A lot of people picked it up. But there is no confirmation, and one of our readers with a contact at Fort Bragg says that in point of fact, the 82nd has not been deployed. So I don't know why Hal put this story on out there. More importantly, I don't know why Trump isn't sending the Army down to that border. They're going to be here in 2 weeks, probably less, now that we know they're not actually walking. And Trump should be sending the military down there. Now, as you know, this caravan was being portrayed by the liberals as Hondurans fleeing the hardship of their country. And when Trump said that there were other foreigners in there, he got attacked. But then Univision confirmed, we know there are Bangladeshi in there. And now Fox News is saying, this caravan includes migrants from India, Bangladesh, Africa, and even MS-13 gang members, which puts a new emphasis on claims by the Guatemalan government that ISIS terrorists are in this caravan. So we know this is all organized. James Woods hit it right on the head. This didn't just spontaneously come up. This was organized. It's being paid for. They're being given rides in buses and trucks. Food and water's being brought in. Apparently they're sleeping in tents. It's a major, major operation. And remember, a few days ago, Representative Matt Gaetz posted a video showing these so-called refugees getting paid to go through this whole thing. They're a rent-a-mob here. Now, Louis Gohmert is out there saying that the Department of Justice needs to investigate who's funding this. Where's the funding coming from? And there are people traveling from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador won't be able to make a legitimate asylum claim once they arrive. It's just saying flat out, not going to happen. And by the way, apparently a lot of Mexicans are now joining in to the caravan as well to try and overwhelm the border and get into the United States of America. And nobody knows how big the migrant caravan is now, but it is huge. So Gohmert is out there saying this is obviously an operation. Now, it turns out the group that has been organizing this has, in fact, been identified. It's called Pueblo Sin Fronteras, which means people without borders. It's an organization that has, for 15 years, worked to help migrants go from point A to point B. And yes, it is funded by George Soros. Meanwhile, the founder of Legal Immigrants for America, Amapola Hansberger, is saying that this caravan of over 7,000, I think it's up to 14,000 now, migrants heading to the border is an immediate threat to U.S. national security. So the legal immigrants in this country are very concerned about this problem as well. Now, as I mentioned before, James Woods came out with this amazing tweet that really just exposed that this was an organized, funded operation. They have gone viral all over social media. And everybody's out there saying, yeah, this is somebody's operation. Democrats, Soros, they're going to try and make some kind of a point about Trump just before the midterms. And because they do have the support of trucks and buses, they're probably going to get here just a couple of days before the midterms to do whatever it is they're going to do to try and derail Donald Trump and GOP control of the Congress. Whether it's going to be just break on through and vote on already existing registrations or create a crisis that the liberals can scream about, oh, he's cruel, he's evil, he's a tyrant. No, he's not. He's president of the United States of America, and his job is to protect this country. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. Donald Trump is now threatening to cut funding to the United Nations over its support for the migrant caravan. It's not just George Soros. The United Nations is out there saying, oh, yes, let them in. Let them in. It's a good thing if you let them in. Because the United Nations is part of this globalist New World Order, one world government agenda, and they see themselves as eventually being that one world government. And boy, if you think they're corrupt now, it would only be much worse if they were running the entire planet here. Now, this is a bizarre story, and I actually saw it a while ago, but it's been reprised today. Believe it or not, there is research being done on a chemical to be sprayed on Americans that would make them more open and receptive to receiving refugees and immigrants. This isn't science fiction. It's not The Onion. It's right out of Brave New World. And it's a published study that appears on the website of the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States of America. And the study is titled Oxytocin-Enforced Norm Compliance Reduces Xenophobic Outgroup Rejection, which is basically saying it is instinctive, because of the way that we evolved, to basically be wary of people outside our known group. And the whole point of this study is that application of this oxytocin, which occurs naturally in the pituitary gland, would overcome that xenophobia. And we would welcome in the refugees and illegal immigrants while they're robbing and raping and thieving and bringing highly contagious diseases. So yeah, they want to drug us to sell us the open borders agenda. We're going to take a phone call now. Chris in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Can you hear me straight?
I hear you now.
All right. Look, I'm basically calling because yesterday there was a caller speaking about Puerto Ricans and voting, right?
Yes.
So I just want to basically respond to him, basically saying that the Puerto Ricans didn't choose to be here. We got forced into it. And then number two is, you know, it's not the Puerto Ricans, it's George Soros, like you was just explaining, and it's you know, all this cheating that's going on all over the voting, and George Soros owning the voting machines, and all the Democrats cheating, and it's not just the Democrats, it's the Republicans too. But he can't just like put all the blame on just one people. You get what I'm saying? It's not fair.
Yeah, it's a systemic problem.
Yeah, and that's all. I don't want to start no trouble with nobody. I don't want to put nobody you know, put nobody down or nothing like that. But I just wanted him to know that I'm Puerto Rican. I live in Florida, and I don't hate white people. Like, I think we all human. I don't even look at colors. That colorful stuff, That's coming from the government to keep us all separated.
Yes.
That's not our fault that Puerto Ricans are voting, or whatever the hell he was talking about. And I'm not mad at him. I understand him. But he has to understand that there's a bigger umbrella over the government that's controlling all this stuff going on under them, excuse me.
Yep.
And that's...
I'm sorry, are you still there?
No, I said that's it. That's all I wanted to say, man.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And apparently, I was just checking real briefly that there is voting rights in Puerto Rico, but it's somewhat different from the United States. And obviously, Puerto Rico and other U.S. territories do not have representation in the Congress and are not entitled to electoral votes for the president. So mostly they're just voting for their own local officials. So thanks a lot for the phone call, Chris. We're going to let you go. Now, getting on back to the migrant caravan, which is more and more being described as a weapon. And everybody's saying, well, why doesn't Trump do something? The president does already have all the authority he needs under the Constitution to stop this migrant horde. And it's found in Title 8, U.S. Code, Section 1182, under the heading of inadmissible aliens, and this is a direct quote. Whenever the president finds that the entry of any aliens or of any class of aliens into the United States would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, he may by proclamation, and for such period as he shall deem necessary, suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as immigrants or non-immigrants, or impose on the entry of aliens any restrictions he may deem to be appropriate. Whenever the Attorney General finds that a commercial airline has failed to comply with regulations of the Attorney General relating to requirements of airlines for the detection of fraudulent documents used by passengers traveling to the United States, including the training of personnel in such detection, the Attorney General may suspend the entry of some or all aliens transported to the United States by such airline. So Donald Trump has had the authority all along to simply say, no, you can't come in. No Hondurans, no El Salvadorians, no Peruvians, none. He's got that authority right now. And I would remind everybody, including whoever listens to the show on behalf of the president, that under Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, okay, the federal government guarantees each state of the union protection against invasion. So there's the letter of the law. Trump has the authority and the obligation to get the army down there on that southern border and halt this migrant horde. I mean, if you've seen the videos of these people, they're painting swastikas on the American flag, and then burning it. They're calling Trump the Antichrist. They're flipping the bird at all the news photographers. They're waving the flag of Honduras. Does that look like a bunch of people who are going to integrate into our society gracefully? I don't think so. And now, of course, we know that MS-13 are using this to get into the country again. So apparently Donald Trump is having a press conference right now in the Oval Office where they're asking him about this. And unfortunately, because I'm doing the radio show, I really can't pay attention. But obviously, we're going to have to look back at the video and see what he's saying, because this is probably the biggest test of his administration. Because if those migrants get through the border, it will be interpreted as a failure by the corporate media and the liberal establishment. Oh, Trump can't keep his promises. If Trump succeeds in halting these migrants and turning them back, then he's going to be demonized as being cruel, as being, obviously inhumane, and racist. They'll keep calling him racist. But again, illegal isn't a race. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's going on with the Saudis and this Khashoggi situation. Recently, a photo surfaced of somebody who looked sort of like Khashoggi, dressed in his clothes after Khashoggi himself had reportedly been killed. And he was caught on security cameras walking all over the place. And it appears that this was an effort by the Saudi government to lay a false trail of evidence to indicate Khashoggi had, in fact, left the consulate in Istanbul and had gone someplace else before missing. But apparently somebody made a mistake because the body double wore the wrong shoes, and they were very obviously not the same shoes. So apparently that part of the cover-up was dropped, and it was at that point that Saudi Arabia came clean and said, yes, he died inside the consulate, and, you know, trying to deal with it. Now, Saudi Arabia spends a lot of money on public relations, and I can imagine they're writing a lot of checks to their favorite PR firms right now. According to Sky News, Khashoggi's body parts, some of them at least, have been found in the garden of the Saudi Consul General's home. Remember, this is the guy who resigned and left the country right after all of this went down. Apparently, there is a well in the backyard, in the garden, and some of the body parts were found down there, and they do seem to indicate that Khashoggi died a very brutal death. So, anyway, the big problem, of course, for everybody is that the Saudis kept changing their story, back and forth, back and forth. They've ruined their own credibility. First of all, by doing this, and second of all, by continually changing the story. Once you come up with a story, you stick with it, and you ride out the storm. So, whatever really went down, they botched it up. And maybe Saudi Arabia just figured that Khashoggi was just going to be yet another journalist who dies and is never commented on by the media, but this one was definitely seized on by the media and by politicians. And there's no question, this incident is being exploited for political gain by quite a few different parties. So this doesn't look like it's going to go away. And we'll see. If the objective was to derail that Davos in the desert, that did not succeed. But it's causing a lot of damage in the Mideast, not just to Saudi Arabia. It's set back the U.S. and Israel effort to try and confront Iran. In fact, if the tensions with Saudi Arabia lead to a diplomatic break there, Saudi Arabia could pivot toward Iran, and the whole plan would be over. So, up in Afghanistan, they're talking about a new peace process for which they will need a new regional consensus, which means they're going to go back and try and get the Taliban to come back to the table. And the Taliban's going to come on in and say, look, we were doing a great job running this country, you know, before the Americans showed up. We had gotten rid of the opium trade. You know, we wanted a fair price for that oil pipeline right of way. And then all of a sudden the United States, you know, goes all thug on us and comes on in. And they've got their pipeline and the opium is flowing. So we'll see what happens up there. Now, more and more people are pointing back to what happened with Khashoggi and contrasting it with the complete silence on the carnage going on in Yemen. And there is a top official of the Lebanese Hezbollah resistance movement out there saying that it shows the U.S. and Europe hypocrisy. They made a big deal about this one reporter, and they're silent about the horror that's going on in Yemen. And he says, Saudi Arabia can buy U.S. President Donald Trump, the U.S. Congress, the Security Council, and major powers with its petrodollars, but it cannot win the support of defenseless and honorable Yemeni nation or Hezbollah's silence. Anyway, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And over the commercial break, I was able to basically take a look at Trump's press briefing in the Oval Office, and he's talking tough. He's saying the right things. He's saying the migrant horde will not get in, and the reporters, of course, are there. Oh, you're just trying to sow fear. You're just trying to scare the American people. And Trump is saying, no, they're not going to get on in. Then Vice President Pence basically spoke up, saying that he had talked on the phone with the president of Venezuela. And the president of Venezuela said that, yes, this was a very well-funded operation by all kinds of leftist groups. Now, they haven't mentioned George Soros by name, but we know he's in the mix someplace. So, all right, we're going to take a phone call. Mo in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Sometimes you just think you're really, in the Matrix, or maybe we are, but, I know you know all about Sun Tzu and the art of war, and I don't really have a question other than I'm just astounded, because if I can't think of one country or municipality, any place in the world, that our military has aided that was good. Every single tin pot dictator from, whoever, Ceausescu, or, every murderous dictator we have backed.
Yes.
Even Saddam Hussein, he was our best buddy. And,
yep.
How does this military, and my father was in the military, served in World War II. I didn't, but I have family in the military right now. And how does that not apply with the art of war? There's more information available now. I know it's for money, and I know they've got a lot of poor people they've, put in the military, but how does the art of war not apply? There's not one freaking war that we have engaged in worldwide in the last, even before Vietnam, but just say Vietnam, which was an unjust war that killed millions of innocent people. They're still doing it, but these people are still signing up. Can't they? And my question is this, and I'll listen to your answer. Why does the art of Sun Tzu, the art of war, which you very well, described, that you have to have the moral high ground, we haven't had the moral high ground for decades. How do these people still sign up? Don't they care?
Well, I imagine they're signing up because they don't have alternatives, in the declining economy. Young people coming out of school, it's either live with parents at home or be homeless in some cases, or join in the military. And the military is paying very well right now in order to keep people coming on in. And probably most people signing up for the military understand that only a small percentage of them will actually go in harm's way. The vast majority will be mechanics and, working in logistics or typing on a computer keyboard or things like that, where they're not going to get shot at. And so they figure, it's a job, it's a good paying job, there are benefits when it comes on out. The military can look very, very attractive indeed. Unfortunately, if you do get put into the conflict zones, then of course it's a completely different story. But I would recommend that you hunt down a treatise called War is a Racket by Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler, because he joined the Marines when he was young. He worked his way up through the ranks and was at one point one of the most respected military officers in the country, and he did everything by the book and obeyed his orders. Then after he retired, he wrote this treatise basically showing what he really thought about it all. And so once again, it's called War is a Racket by Smedley Butler. And Butler was also famous because in the 1930s, Wall Street wanted to stage a coup d'etat against Franklin Roosevelt and bring about a fascist government modeled on that of Benito Mussolini. And to get the military in line with overthrowing the president, they asked Smedley Butler to come on into the plot. And Butler pretended to go along with their plan until he had enough information to basically go before Congress and say, this is a coup d'etat about to happen against our government. And basically, they just hushed it up. And the movie 7 Days in May is supposedly somebody leaked out the story, and that's where that movie came from, although the bankers were left out of that version. And Roosevelt couldn't do anything because the Wall Street plotters simply said, if you arrest any one of us, we'll crash the economy and blame it on your New Deal. Roosevelt wasn't able to get his revenge until the start of World War II, when he nailed them under the Trading with the Enemies Act.
Yep. I know what you're talking about. I read the book. I know about Smedley Butler, and you pointed it out many times. My question to you is, they didn't have the internet then. They can believe whatever the media told them they believe. We have the internet now. How do I go on the internet and see my country blowing up innocent children in wedding processions and keeping the Taliban away from the drugs so we can sell it? How do I, since Vietnam?
Okay, well, I'm going to have to let you go, or actually I'm going to hold you over. Stay on the line. I'm going to bring you back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we go back to Mo in Florida, I'm watching the Fox News feed, and they're discussing what Trump said in his Oval Office presser. And the liberals are already out there saying that Trump wants to close the borders. He's going to close down the borders. And the commentator saying that's absolutely not true. That there are, roughly 1 million legal immigrants coming into this country every single year through the correct legal process. So Trump isn't closing the borders. But again, if you go back to that section of Title VIII I talked about earlier in the program, he's got the authority to do it. And I'm assuming there's enough of our military remaining in this country to go down there and hopefully act as a deterrent. I don't want to see anybody get hurt or shot. But on the other hand, as I said, this is Trump's biggest crisis. And if that horde, the barbarian horde, gets through that border, the corporate media will brand Trump a failure. And don't forget, there's another caravan that has formed up. They're already up to 2,000 people, and they're heading this way. All right, so Mo in Florida. In my opinion, there's no such thing as a just war. If you are the one being attacked and invaded, obviously it is a necessary war. But for every leader who initiates a war of conquest, there's nothing just about it. It's just conquest for the sake of conquest. We're going to go into this other country, we're going to steal all their stuff, kill a bunch of people, and then we'll decorate our soldiers with, uniforms and lots of ribbons and medals so they feel good about what they've been doing, which usually wears off as they get older, I might add. And that's basically it. And apparently it is an instinct we have to follow our rulers into battle, probably from prehistoric times when they were clubbing people in the cave next door. So it is a tragic part of the human condition, and it would be nice if it would go away. But if you look at the history of humanity, there's always a war going on somewhere, and there are always people ready to make a profit off of it.
Hey, Michael, I appreciate you holding me over. Can I respond to what you said?
Yes, of course.
What I'm thinking is, with the Nuremberg trials, the Nazi trials was a precedent. If you're a guard, they try to say we were just viva taking orders. You cannot use that excuse. I don't care who's building the helicopters. I don't care who's building the bombs. If you're facilitating killing innocent people, you're criminally involved. I don't care if you need the money. Something tells me that Michael Rivero, you couldn't pay him enough to bomb an innocent wedding party. Am I right?
You're absolutely right about that.
Okay, well, that's all I'm saying. Ron Paul, you'd have to blow his brains out to get him to kill an innocent, defenseless person. Am I right?
Well, I think if you blew his brains out, he wouldn't be in a position to actually carry through with that. But I get the sense of where you're going with that. Yeah,
I'm saying that this is why do we keep... how did we do not have the moral high ground, Michael, just like Sun Tzu said.
Absolutely
but I don't understand, with the age of the internet, how we have managed to brainwash these soldiers. I don't care how much you need the money. When they kiss their kids goodnight, or they're running for office because they got no legs, nobody asks them, what the hell were you doing over there? How come you're not pissed? Excuse me. How come you're not upset about the people that sent you there?
Well, my
That's
sense...
You know, Brian Mass, I live here in Florida, Mike.
First of all, the brainwashing of young people begins in school, where, you know, they're getting the rah-rah for the military, and it's part of the indoctrination process. Most younger people on the internet are using social media, and they're not researching what's going on in the war zones, because after a while it does get very depressing. Some are, some aren't. And of course, right now we're seeing the beginning of an effort to try and get the internet back under government control and government censorship, so that young people will not be able to go on out and see what's really going on in their name in these other countries. I'm in agreement with you that those who participate in acts of war should be held accountable. Sometimes, though, I do think it's been taken past a reasonable common sense line, like when they go after the guy who tended the dogs at one of those slave labor camps, because he's not actively a part of what's going on. But you're right, coming out of the Nuremberg trials, this, you know, I was only following my orders is not considered a legitimate excuse, and it's also part of the United States Uniform Code of Military Justice, that our soldiers, sailors, air people, I guess, Marines, have a moral obligation to reject an order they know to be illegal. Now, you remember Lieutenant Aaron Watada, he's from right here on Oahu, caused a bit of a stir when he refused redeployment to Iraq, saying it was clearly an illegal war, and it caused a lot of commotion, and the Army really came down hard on him, and I don't know where he is right now. I've lost contact with him. But yeah, unfortunately, our armies do have a lot of herd instinct, and, you know, get along by going along, and peer group pressure, and military commanders rely on that, along with outright fear. I mean, I remember a story that I was told by a Vietnam veteran, somebody I'd gone to school with, and he came back from Vietnam, and he said it was just absolutely insane. That their commanders would order them to charge into a part of the jungle where the VC were located, and of course they'd be fired upon, and they'd turn around to retreat, and they'd find their own commanders aiming machine guns at them and say, "Get back in there."
Well, Michael, all I can say is I want to get off the line here so you can let somebody else call in, but all I can tell you is we need to rewrite the book of Sun Tzu and say the moral high ground means nothing if it lasts for 50, 100 years, because it ain't working right now. These military need to stand up and say, we're not going to do like they did. They did do that in Syria, remember?
It is. Actually, it is, because these U.S. wars are not going well. The Taliban is gaining ground in Afghanistan. We're mired in Syria. We're about to lose that one good and proper. We're still stuck in Libya. We're still stuck in Iraq, and now talking about having to change the government yet again. This was all supposed to be over in 2008, but it's all bogged down because the people who are over there manning the weapons and in the uniforms, they're not really committed to the fight, because they know it's all about oil and oil money and greed and rewriting the map and so forth. So in point of fact, Sun Tzu's principle is very much on display.
Yeah, it just takes a long time, Michael. Every day I wake up and Ron Paul's not president, it sucks. And guys like you, Mike, you're making a big difference. You're getting to a lot of people. And when you go to bed at night, you got to have a smile on your face, in spite of the horrible things that are going on. But
I have a smile on my face, but that's usually because I'm snuggled up next to Claire.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you taking my call.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
My couple of things. One is, you talk about, again, the caravan. The only way you're going to stop that, and Trump better realize it, and he better realize it fast, is to use a large amount of troops, military troops, on that border. Be prepared to use force. By force, I'm not talking about shooting. That should be a last resort. But to actually use gas like CS, pepper spray, and others. I can guarantee you it works. When I was a corrections officer and you'd have a disturbance somewhere, especially like in a mess hall or something like that, you fire one round of the CS and that's it. It's over. They're not going to fight or nothing else. They're not going to fight each other. They're not going to throw anything around or nothing else. And that's the same thing. You fire enough of that stuff, and if we have to fire into Mexico before they can cross this border, then so be it. The other thing I wanted to mention is about the military, about going in as a non-combat. In reality, there is no non-combat. They can use you any way they want, the military. And the other thing is this, too. The people they're really paying the most to are the combat arms. They're not paying they're giving them the biggest bonuses. That's where they make the money, because military does not pay very well, at least for enlisted men. So that's where the money is in the combat, where the big bonuses are. And I don't think they're going to get the type. They're already not getting the type of people they need. If they want to go, for instance, to fight Russia on the, let's say it's state non-nuclear. Let's say it's on the Ukraine border, okay, or on the what borders in the Ukraine, the Polish border or something like that. They would have a chance, because Russia's fighting to defend their own country.
Yes,
they're fighting. They've been motivated. They have a motivated army anyway, and they do have a draft, and people willingly get drafted there. Here you got an all-volunteer army. You're starting to pick from the bottom of the barrel. And if you do have a draft here, I disagree with you on younger people. More of them are aware, I think, than the older people, because they do get their news from the internet. They don't just get it from social media, other than saying, remember, social media, no matter what they want to do, people can share. I share stuff from you, from InfoWars, from many different John B. Wells, from Ron Paul, whatever. I keep Facebook, Twitter, wherever else. So people, and other people are doing this too. So people are getting the news. It's not that they're getting the news, especially the younger people. So they know a lot better now what's going on than people did during the Vietnam era, or the first Gulf War, or even the second Gulf War, when the internet was still basically in its infancy. So I think they're going to have a more and more difficult time getting people. They're going to have to pick more and more from the bottom of the barrel. Maybe sooner or later they'll pick the caravan, the people from the caravan, and put them in the army.
Well, they were trying to do that. They did have a program where they were recruiting illegal immigrants and promising them a green card after they completed their service, but they've canceled the program because, again, the illegal immigrants are not committed to this country, and they were just standing around waiting for their enlistment to end so they could get that green card, and so that program was ended.
I mean, Russia is committed to Russia. The Russians are committed to, even the Chechens now. Somehow, almost like by magic, Putin got the Chechens back into feeling like Russians. There's some of the best Russian troops, from what I understand. Now, there's a military police unit that they use in Syria a lot, because they're good at dealing with the Syrian people and all. They're very well liked. So Russia is Russia. They're not going to, if they have to fight on their border, they're going to fight like tigers. And
yes.
I don't know if you ever watch some of the stuff about World War II, like on the History Channel or the American Heroes Channel, where they showed the Eastern Front.
Yes.
They took a beating in the beginning, the Russians, but unbelievable. They came back, and they kicked butt. If it wasn't for Russia, I don't know if we would have won World War II.
We wouldn't have.
Been a lot harder.
We wouldn't have. I mean, America likes to think that they defeated Nazi Germany, but the fact of the matter is that Russia broke the back of the German Wehrmacht before the U.S. even came into the war. Say again?
I'm saying the Russians had 80% of their divisions on the Eastern Front. 80%. After Stalingrad, that was pretty much it. Then the Battle of Kursk, and that was still 1943. This was still before the invasion, before Normandy.
Yes.
They completely destroyed any ability of the Germans to take the offensive again. After that, it was totally defensive for the Germans, and they were pretty much beat right there and then. So people ought to watch these things and understand this was communist Soviet Union. But what Stalin did, and that was very smart, he actually said, forget this communist stuff. He didn't say those words, but basically, and he called it the Great Patriotic War and referred to the Patriots of old and all that. And that got the Russians to even fight better. So people got to understand that. They're very patriotic people. They're even more patriotic probably today than they were before. They're not playing around. They love their country.
Yep.
They know what we're doing is wrong. They understand what we're doing. All this propaganda that we're doing against them is a bunch of BS. They understand this, and we better start to get that through our heads too. Like I said, even in a conventional war, if it stays conventional, which is, I don't know, you probably, I hate to think it would go nuclear, but it probably would.
Yeah, I think it would. At some point, when you have two nuclear-armed countries at war with each other, the moment either one of those countries thinks they're going to lose the conventional war, that's when they're going to come out with the nuclear weapons. And I think it's going to be the United States, which, after all, is the only nation on Earth to have actually used nuclear weapons against the civilians of another country.
Well, and then, of course, no, there'd be no winner at that point. That'd be it, So, but we got to try to avoid that happening.
Doing my best.
Job to ask the information. So, patriots got to pass in. When I say patriots, I'm not talking about an idiot that yells USA, USA, and thinks just waving the American flag as being a patriot. Being a patriot is loving your country, but understanding that this government is not the country, okay? And understanding when wrongs are being done by this government, it's our job as patriotic Americans to speak up and stop it. And like I said, if I was in the military today, if they told me to fire, for instance, on the Syrians, knowing what I know about the Syrian Arab army, these are heroes, these guys, I would refuse. I'd say, you might as well lock me up right now. Put me in a stockade. That's the Army version of the Navy brig. I'd say, put me in a stockade, but send me to Fort Leavenworth, because I ain't going to do it. And I think a lot more troops should be doing that. They should be saying, we're not going to do it.
Well, that's kind of hard to do if the other side starts shooting at you. And that's kind of what gets these things going, is when you're being shot at, you have a tendency to return fire. The only exception to that, of course, was that Christmas truce in World War I. Anyway, listen, Mark, I got to take another commercial break here. Got to let you go. Thank you for the call. More callers waiting online, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we go back to the phones here, I have a couple of suggestions about this migrant horde heading toward our borders. I mean, in recent years, we've been hearing about two systems that were supposed to be humane ways of driving people out of an area, protesters and stuff. The first was the LRAD, which is just this very loud sound generator that generates sound that's above the threshold of pain. And then there was that microwave area denial system, which heats the water in your skin and makes it feel like you're being burned. Why don't we, supposedly a whole bunch of those things were built up. Let's get those down at the border. Let's put them to use. Anyway, let's go back to the phones. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I'd like to meld about three different topics that you've already talked about.
Okay.
Into one, and starting out with the border. That these people, we have every right to defend ourselves, defend our border. You're absolutely right. It's Trump's obligation, and he has every legal authority to do so. But you also talked about the press that was pillorying him for it, calling him racist and violence and all this stuff. Hasn't even happened yet, and yet here we have, and I'm going to emphasize this, the same press that barely mentions the 22,000 people that were imprisoned in Gaza that were shot down by the Israelis. They barely mention that at all. And they barely mention the apartheid wall that we built with our money around Israel. They barely mention the fact that our troops, speaking of the army, most of which are overseas fighting wars on behalf of Israel's foreign policy. And then I read this morning on what really happened, something that I read every year, and thankfully you put it up every year, that the Friends of the IDF, the Friends of the Israeli Defense Force, again, about the other night over the weekend, they had a big gala party in LA, and they raised $33 million in one night. This is the same group of people who I'm sure that not one of their kids is in the American Army or American military. None of them have been in the American military except for, what's his name, Sheldon Adelson, who says he wished he never had been. He wished he'd put on an Israeli uniform. And they go to great lengths, I'm sure, legal and illegal, to keep from paying their taxes to supporting the American Army, but they're just ponying up millions of dollars in one night for Israel. And it just drives me insane to see it. So the press will get down on Trump, the Zionist-controlled press. Our foreign policy, we're fighting all these wars, as Mark was talking about, unjustly, Syria, everywhere else, that have been primarily for Israel. We wouldn't be there without them, let me put it to you that way. And here we are, all these people who have no skin in the game, but and want to direct our foreign policy, but won't put their own kids at risk. Can you hold me?
Yeah, I read this. Yeah, I looked at that story, and of course, the thing I'm thinking about is there are a lot of homeless and hungry in Hollywood, but apparently they don't count. Of course, you understand these people in making these donations to the IDF are advancing their career in the process. All right, so Peter,
Absolutely.
Stay on the line. We got to do a station identification, and we'll be back. There should be some music playing. There it is. All right. So we'll be back after station identification and continue our discussion. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And we're going to go back to Peter in Los Angeles. And Peter, just sort of pick it up where you left off.
Well, we were talking about the gala event happening in L.A. yesterday, where they raised, or over the weekend, millions, tens of millions, like 33 million, I believe, is what they said.
I think that's the number,
in
yes.
one night, from Hollywood notables and so on, for Friends of the Israeli Defense Force. And we were commenting about how these same people had none of their kids are in the Army. None of them have ever been in the Army. And I'm sure they evade taxes to the best of their ability, legally and illegal, to keep from supporting American soldiers. I'm sure none of them contribute to Wounded Warrior, but they're pouring over the money to Israel. And in the 30 years I spent in the military, I knew 3 people who were Jewish. 3 in 30 years. One of which was by the way, a lieutenant who was thrown out for pulling a knife at a no club on another officer. But nevertheless, it drives me nuts. And you're right. It's a career thing. Arnold Schwarzenegger was there. He's not Jewish. Pamela Anderson was there. She's not Jewish, but they're washed up. And by the way, Pamela Anderson can't sleep her way into a role anymore, so she has to do this, right?
Yeah.
She has to do something like this because, nobody wants to be with her anymore. And Arnold Schwarzenegger is totally washed up, But at any rate, it drives me nuts. Last year it was Robert De Niro who was there.
Yes.
And made a big deal of it. But it drives me insane. And the press the press is controlled by, everything, by the way, everything to get us into wars for Israel, but no skin in the game. None at all. And too good for that, except for a few people, and God bless the people who do.
Well,
But,
wars are created by very rich people to get richer, and for the poor are the ones who are sent to fight.
Unfortunately, that's true. But
Yep.
it's just let's figure out what's going on here about what we're seeing, what we're reading, what we're hearing on all the media, and from whose perspective, where our army has been fighting for the last 30 years, deployed against who. And we don't have anything against Iraq. We didn't have anything against Libya. We don't have anything against Syria. We barely have anything against Afghanistan. We really don't. But yet we're over there surrounding Iran, doing all. Who are we doing this for? And yet these
The
guys
money
don't
junkies.
have they have
We're
no
doing
skin
it
in
for
the
the money
game.
junkies. Doing it for
Well, who are the
Israel.
money junkies? Yeah.
You have to get away from the
Money
idea
junkies
of
and
thinking.
and
You have to get away from the idea of thinking that there's just one cause behind a war or assassination or other historical event. There are usually multiple players with different agendas, but they all overlap by saying we've got to invade these Middle Eastern nations or we've got to assassinate John F. Kennedy. And so partly, yes, it's Israel. Partly it is controlling the oil in the Middle East in terms of what currency it is sold for to keep the petrodollar deal going. Was partly about controlling oil pipeline rights of ways, getting one going through Syria and blocking off another coming down from Russia. And of course, it was about gaining access to the opium poppies up there in Afghanistan.
Yeah, but Mike, there's also a lot of overlap too. The Israeli lobby overlaps with the bank. Who are the bankers, by the way? Who are the financial interests that make all the money, primarily? And then there's also a big overlap with these same people in the military-industrial complex. So it's overwhelmingly overrepresented. And I'm just pointing that out. It's overwhelmingly overrepresented. And there we are. So of all those different influences, the media amongst them is always drumbeating for this. Who are they? So that's my point. And
Okay.
that article on the IDF just set me off. I just can't stand it.
Okay. Anything else, Peter?
No, that's it, Mike. Thank you.
All right. Thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Francis in Montreal. Aloha, Francis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Aloha. I wanted to read you a brief article before I do. The last two callers, had something very interesting to say, and I have something I would like to speak to what they said. And that is right now, between the 25th of October to the 7th of November, was one of the biggest NATO military exercises. Trident Juncture 2018 is taking place in Norway. And there's going to be 65 surface vessels, big ones, 50,000 men and 250 planes and 10,000 armored vehicles. Okay?
That's a
And
big exercise.
That's okay, that's normal. But the point, the one of the telling points of the whole exercise is the U.S. is going to distribute in neutral Sweden 4.5 million pamphlets telling them what to do if the Russians invade Sweden. Like, the Russians aren't going to invade Sweden. Russia has problems just populating its own country and maintaining its own population.
Yep.
It's like Solzhenitsyn said, Russia's on its deathbed. But, Russia, that's all we're hearing. We've got to have a war. And the admiral who's in charge of this whole thing, he's a really important character to keep an eye on, Admiral Foggo. And Admiral Foggo is saying that the Russians are not just challenging us in the Atlantic, but also in the Baltic and in the Black Sea. It's like, that's their naval waters.
Yes.
What are we doing in the Black Sea? What are we doing in the Baltic? But they've got it all reversed upside down. It's crazy. It's like Alice in the Looking Glass.
I mean, very
Anyway,
much
I
so.
wanted to
You're not
read something.
seeing Russia having a massive naval exercise in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah. Anyway, I want to read you this one little article here. and it's in French. I'm going to have to translate it. It's from VoltaireNet, which is one of the best sources of news around.
Yes.
It says here, the don't give a damn attitude of Laurent Fabius, the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Russia, Sergei Lavrov, has given an interview to Russia Today. In this interview, he revealed a telephone conversation with his fellow foreign minister for France, Laurent Fabius, on the subject of Operation Serval in Mali. Quote, France wanted its military operation in Mali to obtain the approbation of the Security Council for the United Nations to fight against the terrorist menace there. Laurent Fabius called me and asked me not to oppose it. But I said it's necessary to kind of think about this. I said to him, you are going to repress the activities of the men that you armed in Libya. And Fabius laughed and said, c'est la vie. And it wasn't political. He said it was a double standard. That's their attitude. We're going to arm these maniacs, and then we're going to go and beat them up and supposedly fight a war against them. And that's c'est la vie.
Yeah, they're flipping sides. I mean, same thing with Saddam Hussein. He was our friend and he was our enemy. The U.S. armed and trained ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria. And now that the war is pretty much over, the U.S. is going on in and bombing them in the hope that none of them are going to survive and say, hey, we were working for the U.S. government all along. There's really not much loyalty in these kind of covert operations, and the people who sign up for them, I hope, would be smart enough to realize they are expendable, and when they're no longer useful, that their employers can quickly turn on them.
Well, the other thing is, you know, this Khashoggi assassination, and it's something really bothering me about that because they're trying to portray him as just a journalist. He's Khashoggi. He's the nephew of Khashoggi, the big, wealthiest man in the world, who's a big arms dealer, and his aunt is the mother of Princess Diana's boyfriend there. What's his name? The guy that owns the department stores in England?
Yeah, and I don't remember his name either. I mean, Khashoggi had spook written all over him. He was...
He tried to stage a coup d'etat. So what kind of a journalist stages coup d'etats against the government? You know, the whole story is like the media has gone completely insane. Like they're just spewing lies, and the lies are more and more easy to pick apart. It's ridiculous.
It is.
I just hope we don't end up in a nuclear war.
Well, I'm
because that's what they want. I don't know what they think they're going to get out of it.
Like I said, this may be an effort to get Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to step down. And time will solve that mystery. Anything else, Francis?
Well, he's not going to step down because the Saudis are the strong sense of vengeance when you insult them.
Yep.
And there's actually the Saudi government has issued kind of an ultimatum with 30 points in it. And one of the points is that they're going to stop using the U.S. petrodollar for transactions, and they're going to stop selling oil to the Americans, and they're going to jack the price of oil up to $200 a barrel. And they're going to invite the Russians. They're already negotiating the Russians to put a military base in the northwest of Saudi Arabia.
Yep.
And they're going to support Hezbollah, and they're going to support Hamas. And instead of being allied with the U.S., they're going to go and ally themselves with Iran.
That was the
Imagine
threat.
that.
That's what they're threatening.
Crazy. Apparently the Israelis, like, their whole foreign policy is in disarray right now, and the Israelis under Benjamin Netanyahu are just freaking out over this. They can't believe the chaos that they've got in their lap. But then they helped to create it.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they
Anyway,
did.
Mike, thanks very much for your show, and it's a great show. Have a
Well,
good
thank
day.
you very much. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Keith in Montana. Aloha, Keith. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Two things now, but Mike, Steve Elkins had sent an email earlier, and I replied back to it. You know, there's that video on YouTube where it says Zionist Jews admit that immigration's number one on their agenda, and I forwarded a photo from that Honduras entourage that's coming up there, and one of the vehicles has that Zionist star on it.
Yes, I saw
so you
that
might
photo.
check your email.
I saw that photo.
Yeah, and the other thing is as your other caller was mentioning, this whole premise of what we see right now going on in Syria, we know that the U.S. and Israel are in Ukraine right now training against the S-300 Russian missiles there with their jets, and also in another country. I forget the other country there. But if you've noticed, see it like CNN Money today, all the stock market's completely down, as well as all of the shows which would show that America's economy has basically hit bottom. No one's buying anything or anything.
Yep.
Which goes in line with all the stores closing and everything like that. So as your video, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, highlights like that, we're at the financial collapse, and the only card that they have to pull from their sleeves is a continued war card. And, of course, we know what's going to happen from that.
Yep. Yeah, we're going to...
Of course, we can also look at how I was also going to say, Mike, we're up in Alaska. Well, sorry, not Alaska, but the Arctic, where Israel's firing all their test missiles and stuff. This whole Arctic deal is being turned into a basic war games. Now, on top of all that, as your other caller mentioned, if you Google or whatever search engine you want to use, DuckDuckGo or whatever like that, of all the different armed forces that are training for cold weather.
Yes.
And this was so reminiscent of when I was watching these old, I got 30, 40 gig of old archives of World War II. But anyway, listening to the German soldiers who proclaimed there as they hit Russia like that, they traveled for days and days and days before they finally even got to the outskirts of Moscow or Leningrad and those stuff. But the problem is they all froze to death.
Yes.
And this is why you see the Western countries now that are training for this cold weather, as well as beefing up their implements, all their military gear to survive cold weather.
It happened to Napoleon.
Are we entering?
That's what did in Napoleon when he tried to invade Russia. It's those Russian winters.
Yeah. So what type of winter are we? I mean, we're entering winter now, and I think that it's not too far off. We're going to see something. I'm just waiting for the Archduke Ferdinand event.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I guess 9/11 could have been considered the event to launch the wars, but I think there's going to have to be another event to try and rebuild America's enthusiasm for more wars. And because Americans are not enthusiastic about the wars, I think it's going to have to be something really big and ugly. And but there's so much stuff that's going crazy. Our government right now is so badly factionalized. We've got this incredible political divide between the liberals and the conservatives that is already starting to break out in violence. I'm still holding to my prediction that the United States of America is going to suffer a Soviet Union-style collapse. And after that happens, we, the American people, are going to have to take it on ourselves to decide what kind of a government we'll have here. And, just watch out for the carpetbaggers. Start out with the Constitution, the first 13 amendments, go back to imposing strict limits on campaign donations to restore power to the people, even make that part of the new Constitution, campaign donation limits. Just take the lessons learned over the last 200 plus years and write a document that keeps the central federal government weak, gives the authority to the states and local governments, and basically hamstrings the ultra-wealthy's ability to try and buy themselves a country.
Right. And I've highlighted in different memes there that the fact of like the 112 suicides a day, the countless tens of millions of Americans that are unemployed, the starving, the homeless, the tent cities that are popping up and expanding in city after city, and of course they're in democratically held areas. But the fact is when you and we can even add the veterans that are dying.
Yes.
The fact of being arrested for trying to feed the homeless, collecting water, all this stuff. The corporate just like we see in the stock market, as the stocks are selling like that, the big corporations are doing just like they did before to buy up all assets that they have. And this is what I see. So for those people that do vote, since midterms are coming up here, you might remember that both political parties have for decades destroyed this country. And it's not getting better for us. The only ones, I think in that one little meme there, it mentions that the CEO pay is 350 something like that to 1, compared to back in the 80s when it was only 20 to 1. This shows you the total corporate grab of what's happening to this country as well as the rest of the world. And they're not going to let go of their power easy.
No, it's going to take a global financial crash to bring that whole corrupt structure down. Or a world war, one of the two. We're heading into dark times. There's no two ways to say it. There's no way to make it funny or humorous or something to look forward to. There are bad times. They're already here, and as you say, they are only going to get worse. Sorry about that.
Yeah. One more thing. Yeah. One more thing about this journalist. They're making such high. Not on 9/11 when 3,000 Americans died, nor the fact of all the Ukrainian soldiers Ukrainian journalists, the Gaza journalists, those in Syria that have been killed. Why is it just this one? This has got to be a distraction from some other big event that's coming.
It could be. It could be.
And then we have Julian Assange that has been incarcerated basically for how many thousands of days now. Why all this attention? And then we have the bombing of the Al Jazeera networks and stuff. Why all of a sudden is it just this one journalist?
Like I said, there's a political agenda behind it. Anyway, listen, Keith, we're coming up on a commercial break. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I don't think Russia would invade Sweden because they've already been invaded by refugees, right?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, Russia's not going to invade anybody. They're all about making deals, selling products, peace through commerce. Russia's not going to invade Europe because Europe's already coming apart between the economic chaos caused by the European Central Bank, the refugee crisis. I imagine Putin's probably laughing at all this talk about how he's coming to get Europe. He's already got a very nice country to run. I don't think he's interested in conquering Europe.
There's nothing in Europe to conquer, though. What's there that the Chinese make everything? So people don't understand what is in Europe that the Russians need. Russians got commodities up the wazoo. China's an economic super. So, I mean, they're already looking east. So there's nothing in Europe. So I think Europe looks at that as they're so important. And you know what's funny, Mike? Like, Europe is just, Putin's laughing. Europe is a circular firing squad going on, as you can tell.
Yeah.
They're just shooting each other.
They are. Yeah. What does Europe have that's worth invading for? And wouldn't it just be easier to do business, which is what Russia is trying to do? That's the whole point of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Is Europe and Russia just want to do business together and stop all this nonsense about, military industrial complex before it bankrupts all these countries.
I wonder how much money that costs to print those pamphlets, that they handed out over at NATO. Yeah.
Talk
NATO,
about pointless propaganda.
There.
I mean, and I wonder what the Swedish reaction to all of this is. I'm sure that Russia is going to be watching this exercise in Norway very closely to make sure it's not the start of a real invasion. When you've got that many forces there, that's a huge exercise, and it could go live, at a moment's notice. So, anything else?
Yeah, I would expect to have them to had more than 50,000. I mean, Russia mustered 300,000. Hate to break this to people. Russia has the largest land or largest tank, like, amount of tanks in the world.
Yes.
I mean, 12,000 something. I mean, that's a lot of tanks. I know, and you throw the Chinese in there. Yeah, I mean, I don't see the NATO invading. Yeah. Hey, Mike, I just want to talk. If the pulling out of the intermediate range wouldn't, I mean, Kaliningrad's right in the vicinity of Europe, like, obviously. I mean, that would be a great intermediate range missile platform because they do have nuclear weapons in Kaliningrad. So, I mean, that's right in the middle of Europe there, right? Yes. I mean, what a crazy thing. I mean, I see John Bolton was in Russia today, right? Talking to Sergey. Yeah, and probably nothing going to happen because they all have their own agenda in the U.S. What a mess, Mike. Like, of all times to do this, well, let's pull out. And Mike, do you believe that? Like, that Russia it was cheating on? I don't believe that for one bit because you know why? It follows a pattern of lies and deception and where are they getting it from? The same 17 intelligence agencies? Where was the 17 intelligence agencies on 9/11? Where were they on Iraq? It's
exactly.
all,
it is. It's Trump wanted to pull out of the treaty, and they just came up with this story that Russia was in violation of it, ignoring the fact that the U.S. itself has violated the terms of the treaty with one of their weapons platforms. But Trump is now out there saying that he wants to build more nuclear weapons until China and Russia come to their senses. And basically, the new U.S. policy seems to be to hold a nuclear sword of Damocles over the heads of the rest of the planet to get them to go along with what we want. And of course, it's going to be very expensive. And it's not like it's really necessary because the United States already has the largest nuclear arsenal on Earth. They have enough nuclear weapons to wipe out all life on the planet 10 times over. And, obviously this is going to be good news for the companies like Pantex that make these things. And by the way, apparently Pantex suffered some kind of an emergency event earlier today or yesterday. But
I was going to talk about that, actually. And during Texas, they had some kind of incident today, I think.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, there was supposedly some, was it RC-130s or whatever flying around there looking, I don't know what's going on over there. But I hope they didn't have an incident, you know what I mean?
Well, that's where they build the bombs, and or one of the places where they build the bombs, and hopefully they haven't had a radiation accident. If we start hearing for calls for, wide area evacuations, then they've got another bad nuclear accident on their hands.
And Mike, real quick, I'm just going to mention about the migrants and stuff, all these migrants. There was a book, I think I talked about this a while ago, called Weapons of Mass Migration.
Yes.
These migrants can be used as a political and an economic weapon, right?
That's exactly what's going on. This is an obvious organized operation here. Anyway, Dustin, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we go back to the phones here, a couple of little updates here. Somebody just emailed me this Twitter video showing these Honduran migrants being driven towards the U.S. border on flatbed trucks, just right out there in the open, waving the flag of Honduras. Now, there's a story that is over at Before It's News, basically saying that the president of Mexico and the president of Guatemala actually had a deal to open up the borders and create a passage for these people to come to the United States. Mexico apparently has been issuing them temporary IDs called regional visitors cards, which are good for 72 hours for the express purpose of bringing them to the border with the United States. Probably these governments of Guatemala and Mexico are happy to be rid of these people. If the United States is dumb enough to let them in, then it's their problem now. So essentially, Mexico and Guatemala are supporting an invasion of our sovereign territory. I think that might be construed as a war. And apparently the Democrats have already gone to court trying to get a court order to prevent Donald Trump from using the U.S. military. Now, the court doesn't have jurisdiction in this case. because of the War Powers Act. All right, let's go back to the phones. Laura in Michigan, thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Number one, you were talking about oxytocin.
Yes.
In Germany, they're putting oxytocin in the milk. Think about it. Most people drink milk, you know.
So they're already drugging those people.
Yeah, yeah. Another thing, okay, you talked about the weapons, you know, the microwave and the loudspeaker.
Yeah.
Those are all developed for us citizens. When our citizens decide that this corrupt government, we need to rebel, they're going to use those on us. They won't use them on other people. They'll be using them on us.
I think it would be a good field test. It's a good field test. Nobody's going to get killed. But let's see if these things are as effective as we've been told that they are.
Right. Also, I've heard that if you slow up the video on those trucks that are transporting the refugees or whatever, the illegal aliens, there's a big Star of David on the trucks.
It's one Star of David in one van. And I'm looking at Fox News right now, and they're talking about now they're being described as Central American migrants. They've dropped the whole Honduran thing. And they've got tents, nice tents. You know, it's obviously the camp where they're going to be spending the night. This is costing a huge amount of money to do.
What do you think of the logistics? Just water for that many people.
Yeah.
Let alone food, you know. You can't carry that much water.
Supposedly it's up to 14,000 now. And I would imagine that probably, given the fact that they're not really walking the entire way, which the media is trying to claim they are. Oh, these poor people, they're walking all the way. No, they're not. They're being trucked and bussed. And I put a link to that Twitter video showing them riding on flatbed trucks, just crowded on in there. Probably whoever set this up has sort of preset these base camps, if you will. And they're just being driven from one base camp to the next, to the next, to the next. And because they are on these wheeled vehicles, it's a guarantee now they will be at the border just before the midterms to make whatever point it is they're trying to make.
Okay, lastly, I just got notified today that the constitutional militias are called up, including the mountain men, Minutemen, to report to the southern border. Nobody believes that the government's going to do anything with these people. They don't trust them. They're going to head down to the border. So you can probably find that on your on the internet. But the constitutional militias have been called up.
Who called them up?
Whoever's ahead of that, you know.
Oh, okay.
I had another militia person call.
All right, I'll take a look for that. I'm alarmed at that development. I understand their concern that for all his tough talk, that Trump is not, in point of fact, going to be seen to do much of anything.
Right.
But
right.
I'm concerned about all these militias getting into a situation where people are really going to die. And again, that would be used against Donald Trump. It's a lose-lose situation that they've crafted for Donald Trump. And what the globalists are doing, what Soros is doing, is what they did to Europe. Because remember, that whole disaster began with a giant migration from the Middle East, from Syria. And it got a lot of news coverage and aerial shots of all these people walking. And then they just poured on into Europe. And Europe has been seriously in decline since then. And we're hearing there's already another 2,000 strong so-called caravan that has formed up that is following the main one now. So this is it. They're just going to pump people into this country until this country is no more.
Well, I'm just going to face facts. At some point, we have to fight for this country, and we're going to have to do something drastic. If it happens, it happens. You know?
Well,
we got to fight it sometime.
This country is beyond saving. Which is why I keep focusing on a Soviet Union-style collapse and an economic crash. The problem is going to be, as we rebuilding the nation, what are we going to do with all this flood of people who came in here with absolutely no vetting? We don't know how many are MS-13 gang members or other criminals. We don't have no idea if these people are carrying contagious diseases. I mean, right now over in Africa, they're saying that Ebola outbreak is going out of control because of the violence in the region. People who are carrying the disease, they're infected, but they're not symptomatic yet. They're trying to get out of there. All it's going to take is one of them to get to an airport and contaminate people at the airport, and it will be all over the globe. This is such reckless disregard, not just for our nation's sovereignty, but for our nation's health and safety. And as I said before, the Democrats are already trying to find a judge who will issue a court order saying that Donald Trump cannot deploy the military to the southern border. Now, if he enacts the War Powers Act, posse comitatus is not going to apply because it is an international border. So we'll see what's going to happen on that, but it's an ugly situation. Okay, Laura, anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And we're going to switch over to Art, who is off the grid. Aloha, Art. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I could really sink my teeth into this discussion about the border, but that's not that. And I would really love to get into it, but that's not what I called about. You're talking. What was it again? The nuclear, Trump talking about pulling out of this nuclear arms treaty, and all of a sudden everybody's screaming. But what would that do? The damage that would do to the non-proliferation treaty and blah blah blah. Wait a minute. Nobody's worried about the fact that the biggest holder of nuclear weapons in the Middle East is Israel, and Israel has never signed on to the treaty. So, seriously, you're not going to worry about one of the largest and primary violators of human rights in the history of man, sitting on over 600 nuclear warheads, who's never signed the non-proliferation treaty. You're not worried about them, but you're worried about what the United States just might do. Seriously?
Yeah. It's hypocritical. It is very hypocritical, and again, it's sending a message to the world that if you sign a treaty with the United States government, it's not worth the paper it's printed on, because Trump is just yanking us out of treaties. He yanked us out of the Iran nuclear deal. Now he wants to get out of the INF treaty, and we're just going in this horrible, horrible direction. It's going to end badly. What can I tell you?
Here's the thing. People can use that argument all day long, and it's a valid argument. It really is. But then again, how many treaties has Israel violated? But they're never held to the standard. Why is it we have to be held to this high standard that's so high, but everybody else is exempt? I don't understand the logic here. If you're going to hold us accountable, you hold everybody accountable. I don't give a damn where they come from. And I don't care whether they're flying the red, white, and blue or the white and blue with a big freaking star on it. Everybody. I don't care. I'm tired of this crap. And as far as all this caravan coming up, Mike, have you done any research onto this to find out who's funding it? I can tell you right now, there are 4 organizations. I'm not at my computer right now, but I've saved the documents where I've researched this. And there are 4 organizations right now that are funding this whole caravan thing coming up here. 3 of them are funded by the George Soros. Now, who the hell is... come on, seriously? It's time we pull our heads out of our derrieres, get a whiff of fresh air, and get ready to fight, because that's what this is coming down to.
I hope you're wrong. I don't know that you're wrong.
So do I.
But I hope that you're wrong.
Unfortunately, I don't think I'm wrong. I've been watching this for over 2 decades now, and I don't see any way out of it.
Yeah.
I hope and pray I'm wrong. I really hope and pray I'm wrong. But unfortunately, Mike, I don't think I am.
Yeah, the world is a mess. The world is a mess. It's certainly in my lifetime, I've never seen so much corruption just right out there in the open. I've never seen so much warmongering. I've never seen so much cruelty, and it can get very depressing looking at this stuff day after day after day. And sometimes I have to ban Claire from the website because it gets to her too. And
well, also, Mike, this whole caravan thing. I've been looking at these videos for like almost 3 or 4 days now of the trucks that you're talking about. And then, they're talking about, these women with these strollers and the babies. And, wait a minute, how many miles have they supposedly covered so far? Look at these people. Do these people look dirty and grimy because I'm telling you, I was in the military and I know how long it takes at a combat style march. I can cover 4 miles an hour. Now, how long would it take? How far do you think I could travel at 4 miles an hour, walking 10 to 15 hours a day? How long do you think it would take me to go from Honduras to the U.S.-Mexico border? And you look at these people, none of them look exhausted. None of them look dirty and tattered. The wheels on those strollers would have fell off a long time ago.
Well,
somebody is
we know they're being driven. We know they're being driven. I just put up another video of them being driven. And by the way, the vast majority of these so-called Honduran, or now they're saying Central American refugees, are military-aged males. There are actually very few women and children, just enough to look good for the press cameras. And it concerns me that our corporate media is not revealing the fact that these people are being given rides. So the corporate media is fully on board with whatever's going on.
Yep, and it comes right back to what I've already said several times over the past week since this whole thing started. If anyone doesn't think that this is a full-on invasion, they are either ignorant, stupid, or they're part of the propaganda machine. There is no other way around this. Anyway, Mike, I got to get off here before I lose myself, man. Have a great one, dude.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Frank in London. Aloha, Frank. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. To pick up from your last caller, I can understand his rage. I mean, my parents are of Afro-Caribbean background, as we say in the UK, right? And if Trump does not do anything about this, this is what amounts to an invasion. He should get to hell out of government, right?
Yep.
Because that's an invasion, and anybody with any common sense can see it's an invasion, a blatant invasion, and a complete disrespect for borders. You fly in a flag of a country that you're supposed to have treated you badly. These people are supposed to be bedraggled and all that. I saw some footage. Those people do not look hungry to me. They do not look bedraggled or miserable or oppressed or anything like that.
I hate to be cruel about it, but frankly, many of them look to me like they could lose some weight, and the walk would be good for them.
Yeah, yep. But that's a fact. That's a fact. And there is no walking, because by the time they arrive at the border, they'll be about the same size, because they're not walking, they're not going through swamps and all this kind of stuff. So there's no caiman. They're gonna depopulate the amount of people coming. So I just, this is crazy. This is stupid. And anybody with any common sense, unless you're really that dumbed down and comatose by the mainstream media to believe this is some kind of, they should be taken in on the humanitarian grounds, because it's predictable what's going to happen. They're going to put women and children crying, wailing, and bawling up front. That's what's going to happen, right?
Yep.
You don't know who these people are that are coming through. And I bet you at least 50% of these people are complete undesirables that are not needed in their country. That's what I want to say, Mike.
Well, again, my position on immigration is there is a legal immigration process, and every year, 1.1 million legal immigrants join our population. And hello, welcome. I hope we're not too much of a disappointment. But this open borders agenda, this goes right back to George Soros and his dreams of a one world government and one world private central bank to hold us all slaves to debt until the sun swells up and burns our planet to a crisp. So again, this is a repeating pattern. We saw it in Europe. That whole migrant invasion of Europe began with a gigantic march that received all kinds of media coverage, and oh, these poor people, they're fleeing the war-torn areas, and forget about the fact we're the ones who started the war. We have to take them in, so forth and so on. Anyway, listen, Frank, thank you for the phone call. We're going to have to take a break for commercials. Boy, the phone lines are just loaded up right now, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we get back to the phones here, a couple of quick updates. Apparently, down at the Pantex plant in Texas, the security incident has ended and an all clear has been issued. So whatever was going on, they're saying it was a security issue, not an issue with the weapons material. And apparently yesterday on CNN's Anderson Cooper 360, Van Jones basically said, well, Donald Trump is obviously taking advantage of the migrant caravan to talk about stronger immigration laws, and so he's benefiting from this. Therefore, it's more likely Donald Trump is paying for the migrant caravan than George Soros. I mean, we shouldn't be blaming George Soros. He's just, such a nice person, which is, of course, why somebody planted a bomb in his mailbox earlier today. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Mark in Montana, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, Michael. I'm the oil field worker. Before I start, I want to talk about the border. Before I want to start, I want to challenge everybody that calls in today. Go to the site and put in $5 because this is, everybody donate $5 that called in today. It would help RBN out. I don't agree with Michael on everything. My mother was a Jew, so I don't agree with a lot of the Israeli stuff. But you notice I'm not calling him a Nazi, and I'm not following him to In-N-Out Burger and heckling him while he's trying to eat dinner. So
well, thank you for that. And thank you for being civil and courteous. And by the way, my first wife was Jewish.
I'm sorry. my mother was Jewish. They're difficult people to deal with. I want to talk about the border. I kind of have a unique perspective because I live real close to the Canadian border.
Yes.
But when I work, my on shift, I'm on the Mexican border, and I'm really close to the Mexican border. And I see what goes on down here, and people don't understand the dynamics of this border because about 90% of the evil, wicked, vile stuff that goes on is rape trees. I don't know. Do a research on rape trees. What the coyotes are doing to these poor people that they're bringing across the border. The kids that they're stuffing their backpacks full of whatever contraband they can bring into the country and shoving over the border. This families belong together crap. The Border Patrol guys were saying that about 1 out of 8 of the kids were actually with their parents. They suspect that the 7 out of 8 that were coming in and are coming in are being sex trafficked or human trafficking of some sort.
Yep.
People have no idea. And if you want to challenge me, get a hold of me. I will take you for a drive down to the border, and I'll let you out. I'm going to be armed. You get to be disarmed, and you get to have fun walking around and talking to these folks. I'm not saying all Mexicans are bad. I'm not saying that at all. And I'm not saying all immigrants are bad. I got lots of immigrants in my family. But what I am saying, that unfettered immigration, all it does is invite evil people to come to this country to do evil crap. Because what they're doing initially, jumping the border, is a criminal act. What makes you think that they're going to stop once they get here from doing criminal things? And they don't carry insurance, a lot of them, because they can't get insurance because they'll get found out. They don't carry insurance on their vehicles. So when they kill somebody, all they got to do is make it back over the border because Mexico won't extradite them. So that's kind of what I want to talk about.
Well, it is a mess, and I'm very much aware of the human trafficking issues down there at the border and the drug smuggling. Basically, bad people are taking advantage of this open border nonsense. And it's happening here in the United States, and it's been happening in Europe as well. Anyway, listen, Mark, we're going to let you go. We got to take a quick break for station identification, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and they are busy today. Let's go back and take a phone call from James in Ohio. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, with the danger of giving them ideas, but I don't think I have to. I think there's at least a good possibility that I know what they're up to. Let's say the migrants get within, I don't know, some tens of miles of the border, and a unit of the Mexican military and or police mows them down with machine gun fire and blames it on the U.S. military or Border Patrol. The emotional impact of a My Lai type massacre would be enough to swing the midterm elections. And since they have nothing else, and we know that in the past that, we know what happens to patsies. I think there's at least a good possibility that this was the plan. But that's all I got for you, and keep up the good work.
Well, thank you. And the reason I don't think that is likely to happen is when these migrants get to the border, there's going to be all kinds of media coverage. The press is going to be there with video cameras out there. I'm sure that the Border Patrol and the Army, if they are in fact deployed, are going to have their video cameras. There are going to be drones overhead. So it would be impossible for Mexico to do this. But you're right. If there was a massacre of these people, it would work against the GOP. If they break through the fence and get into the country, it's going to go against the GOP. It's a lose-lose situation. And I'm sure partly it's motivated by wanting to skew the midterm elections. But given that there is a second caravan already forming up and heading this way, apparently with the connivance of the governments of Mexico and Guatemala, this looks to be the beginning of the flood of foreigners into the United States uncontrolled. Now, the liberals are already out there screaming that, we've got to let them in. It's humanitarian. Barack Obama is out there on the campaign trail saying, we've got to do right by these people that have been suffering, which, of course, is the direct opposite of what he was saying back in 2005 when he was saying we simply cannot allow people to pour into this country unchecked, undocumented, and I forget, without the proper papers. That's his position back in 2005. So they're just, complete change. Okay.
Yeah, I would also urge everybody to read the book Camp of the Saints by Gene Raspale, or watch a YouTube video on it. That seems to be their playbook. So that's all I have for you. Thanks, and keep up the good work.
All right, thanks an awful lot here for the phone call, and we're going to switch over to Jim in Michigan. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I think Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi and everybody, once these immigrants come over the border illegally, they should at least put up 20 or 30 in their houses. I think that would be a good indication that they're for immigration. What I'm looking at is the fact that, from all indications, the United Nations and George Soros have a lot to do with this. These people just didn't wake up one day and said, "Oh, I think I'm going to go to the U.S. and break down the Mexican border." Mexico is totally involved in this. They sent 50 police to stop, 10,000 people?
At that time, it was about 4,000.
4,000 what?
It was about 4,000 of the migrants at the point where they interacted with the Mexican police. But you're right, it was a token presence, and those Mexican police really got seriously beaten up and bloodied.
Now, because the Mexicans on their southern border with Guatemala, they do have a wall. And if you cross that wall, normally you get 6 months in prison, tortured to death, God knows what. But the whole point is Mexico is actually involved in this. The way I'm thinking is, in fact, UN's involved, George Soros is involved. We ought to stop funding totally to the United Nations kick them the hell out of our country because they're not here to help us or the world. I mean, everything they do is totally corrupt. And I think we ought to, personally, close off all relationships and funding to all those South American countries. We ought to close the borders, which means no Americans go in, no Mexicans come back into our country. I think we need to say that any immigrants or illegal immigrants who are sending money out of our country, that money is frozen. You can't send any more money out of the country. And like you say, Title VIII, any employer that hires Mexican or an illegal alien, no matter what they are, go and arrest all these sanctuary city mayors and governors or whomever. We need to get really tough. And when those immigrants come to the border, I'm sorry, we're going to say, and what they're doing is they have the women and children in front of the line. What a bunch of cowards. I mean, this is crap. I mean, to put the women and children...
they're using them as human shields. And there are now an estimated 14,000. So Trump has got to send at least 20,000 military down there. And as I said, take the LRADs, take those microwave area denial trucks, and just, drive back and forth and give those people a reason to turn around and go back.
And if anything, slice down the middle and get the women and children out of there, and then just tell anybody coming in, we're going to gas you first, and then we're going to use rubber bullets. You come any further than that, we're going to live ammunition. And I'm sorry, there's got to be a point with Donald Trump where you say, no, enough is enough. You're not going to invade our country. And I'm sorry, live ammunition, we're going to give you gas, we're going to give you rubber bullets, and then we're going to give you live ammunition. And if you keep coming, this is what's going to happen. And I tell you what, just going to send a message to everybody in the world that, no, we're done with this. And George Soros needs to be arrested. The United Nations, we have to cut off all funding with those people. We got to get them the hell out of the United States. Take your business and go elsewhere because they do not have our best interest right now. So, anyways, I don't know. What do you think about that?
I'm in agreement with pretty much all of it except the use of live ammunition, which would be a PR disaster, not just for Donald Trump, but for the United States. But right now, as I said before, this is Trump's biggest test in office. And if he fails to do something, he's talking tough about it. He's talking tough about it on the campaign trail. But the time for him to start deploying the military is right now. And I'm curious why he's not doing it, because if he talks tough and does nothing, and those Hondurans flood into this country, first of all, I'm willing to bet there are fraudulent voter registrations already waiting for them when they get here, because that's what's luring a lot of them up here. The Democrats are promising them free stuff. Come up here, get into the United States of America, and we'll take stuff away from the people who've lived here for generation after generation, and we'll give it to you for free. That's the Democratic campaign platform. And if that actually happens, if Trump lets that happen, well, he's a one-term president, and they're going to lose the midterms, and he's going to lose 2020. So, I mean,
that's why I said that's why I said use rubber bullets first. And if you want to be like the Germans who want to leave their country now because they've been just totally devastated by their government. It's just like, no, it's at a point right now where, okay, use rubber bullets, first gas, and then rubber bullets and microwave, whatever but if they still keep coming, just say, hey, this is it. I warned you, this is what's going to happen. PR, who gives a crap? PR, Mike.
Politics
look what they've
is perception.
Done in Europe.
Politics is perception. If the U.S. military...
When it comes to our country, I'm done. I'm done with this stuff.
I hear what you're saying.
Anyway.
But if the U.S. military, the Border Patrol, or those so-called constitutional militias open up with live fire on these people who are, as far as I can tell, unarmed, it will be a public relations nightmare for the entire country.
Okay, my friends. So I love your program. Thanks for your input.
Okay, thank you very much here, and we're going to do a shout-out to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. The phone lines are open. Let me clear the list here, and we'll get back to some news. Okay, we were talking about what's going on in Yemen. The cholera in Yemen is now the worst cholera epidemic on the entire world in a decade, according to the Red Cross. And of course, under the tightening Saudi blockade, they lack food, water, medicine, and fuel. And there are more and more calls for humanitarian aid to be sent into Yemen. But if the Saudis close that port in Hodeidah, there's no way to get it to them. It's a starvation blockade. Okay, we have another caller on the line, and that's Harry in Alaska. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I mean, I was just wondering if I just started to watch the show here today and I read somewhere on here that the 82nd Airborne may be called to go to the border.
No, that turned out to be fake news from Hal Turner, who, by the way, is a known FBI asset.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say that I actually served in the 101st when Eisenhower used troops to put the kids in school.
Yep.
And I also served in the 82nd Airborne Division when they put Meredith in school. So that was quite a while ago.
Yes.
But to think we can't use the 82nd Airborne Division to protect our border, I mean, I just find this whole thing absolutely ridiculous.
Well, the question I have is, I mean, the story coming out of Hal Turner made perfect sense, and I think that's why so many people picked it up. But we're asking, why isn't Trump sending the troops now? They should be, getting into position in order to be able to basically respond to wherever this horde of migrants is going to try and breach the fence, presumably someplace in Arizona. And so Trump gave this press conference in the Oval Office. He's being accused of fear-mongering. And he should be deploying them now. We're talking about less than 2 weeks. They will be here.
Yes, and some of the things that I read on there and I did see that they're being loaded into trucks and moved up there quite rapidly.
Yeah, they could be here by the end of the week. If they're being given rides on trucks and buses, they could be at that border fence in Arizona by the end of this week. And Trump needs to move on this.
Yeah, I don't know how many presidents have actually used. I do know, because I actually served in the 101st and the 82nd, that we had a president that used troops to enforce what the federal government said. And I guess I am at a loss why the 82nd is not actually being used, or the 101st. I don't know where they are, if they're overseas. So I don't really know anymore. But I do remember what we did there in Mississippi was they covered the street with a wedge, and we had M1 Garans, and we were ordered to put our bayonets on, and we took half step forward. And that crowd that was in front of us, we weren't going to stop. They had to move. That was all. But anyway, that's about all I had to say, is that I don't understand why we're not protecting them. We can use them against American people. We can't use them against foreigners invading us. That's just okay. Good show, Mike. I listen to your show all the time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And we're going to let you go. The phone lines are now open. Yeah, there's the issue. These people, contrary to what the corporate media is trying to tell you, they didn't walk from Honduras. They're being given rides. They're only walking when the press cameras are rolling, and they're getting a lot of media coverage. But people who are down there in Guatemala and now in Mexico, they're driving past these convoys of trucks carrying all of these migrants, and they're posting the videos online. So we know what's going on. And if they are on trucks and in buses, and we know they are, they could literally be at that border fence by the end of the week. And Trump should be moving on this right now. Now, I know the Border Patrol is on notice, but they're saying they're inadequate to deal with an estimated 14,000 migrants trying to break on through. I know that the National Guard is being deployed, but they may not be enough. There needs to be at least 20,000, maybe 30,000 armed forces on that border to turn these people back, along with the tear gas and the rubber bullets, the LRAD, and the microwave area denial weapons. In fact, they might want to put the microwave gizmo on a helicopter and just go back and forth and sweep back and forth to give it much larger coverage. But after the tough talk that he gave in the Oval Office today, if Trump doesn't actually do something, he is definitely finished. And if those migrants break through that fence, it will hurt the GOP in the midterm elections. The timing is not a coincidence. Getting on back to the news and the conflict zones, yesterday we reported on how Jordan's King Abdullah had announced his decision that one of the terms of the 1994 peace treaty that allowed the Israeli government and farmers to use Jordanian land is being rescinded. And King Abdullah II is reasserting Jordanian sovereignty over those areas of Bakura and Gam. Well, Israel, in retaliation, is now threatening to cut off water supplies to Amman from 4 days a week to 2 days a week. So King Abdullah II better get out there with a dowsing rod and start looking for new sources of waters. Okay, over in northern Gaza, at least 20 Palestinian demonstrators were wounded yesterday afternoon in clashes with Israeli soldiers in the northwest Gaza Strip, close to the border with Israel. And apparently they were wounded by gunfire. And every Monday, hundreds of Palestinians join a weekly demonstration in northwest Gaza on the maritime border with Israel. Now, this is different from the one that's over about the Great March of Return. This is about the fact that Israel keeps restricting the fishing waters that the Gazans are allowed to use. It's now down to 3 miles. And if you know anything at all about fishing, you will understand that is a serious impediment. Okay, Israel has announced they have no choice but war with Hamas, that they've exhausted all options in dealing with Hamas. Actually, no. They haven't tried the option of ending or at least loosening the blockade and allowing more food and water and supplies to get into Gaza. They haven't even tried the option of considering a two-state solution. The options that Israel has exhausted all come down to trying to drive the Gazans out, trying to crush Hamas, and trying to basically find a way to retake Gaza. But it does look like they're announcing there's going to be a major, major war on Gaza again. It seems like every 2 to 3 years, Israel comes up with a reason to just go on in and bomb Gaza, to keep them under control, to keep them constantly having to rebuild their lives. Okay. Now, Taiwan has raised tensions with mainland China because it's taken delivery of the first of a fleet of revamped F-16 Viper jets in a move that is obviously going to cause friction with China, after the U.S. sent 2 warships through a narrow strait, which separates Taiwan from mainland China. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and I want to step on back to what's going on with Israel, because I just got a confirming story from South Front. Israel has deployed over 60 battle tanks and armored vehicles near the border with Gaza. And so it looks like there's going to be more than just bombing this time. The Israeli leadership is openly calling for an outright invasion in Gaza, and Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman is among the key supporters. So they're going to go on in there, and it's going to get really, really ugly. I want to go off on a tangent here a little bit because the corporate media is making a big deal over this Mega Millions lottery. They're going to have another drawing tonight, and the top prize is like $1.6 billion, which is a lot of money until you realize how much of a slice of that the Internal Revenue Service is going to take. But on the off chance that one of you listening to the show wins that, remember that Republic Broadcasting and WhatReallyHappened.com could benefit from a couple of million. So, all right, now then, getting on back to the serious stuff. North and South Korea have agreed to withdraw firearms around that demilitarized zone, which basically is another way of signaling the Korean War is over. And they're going to withdraw 11 guard posts within a half-mile radius of the military demarcation line on their border by the end of the year. They're also going to pull out all firearms from a joint security area at Panmunjom and cut to 35 each of the numbers of personnel stationed there, and they're going to start sharing information on the surveillance equipment. So it's another positive sign. Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un are trying to weld Korea back together again. Alrighty, now Africa is getting ready to, Russia is getting ready to send additional military advisors to the Central African Republic, trying to expand Russia's sphere of influence outside Eurasia. And that may be perceived as a threat to the United States. AFRICOM, which is in there to assert U.S. control over all the African nations and all those wonderful undeveloped natural resources here. As we mentioned earlier in the show, tensions between Russia and the United States are ramping up to what is being described as a pre-war level. And the rhetoric coming out of Washington, D.C., and now out of Moscow is getting very hostile and confrontational. Now, Trump says he's going to withdraw from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which was signed by Gorbachev and Reagan. And again, another reminder, you can't trust a treaty signed with the United States. And he's claiming that he will boost our nuclear forces until China and Russia come to their senses. Well, the United States already has the largest nuclear arsenal on Earth. They can wipe out all life on this planet 10 times over, and I don't think making the rubble bounce one more time is going to change China and Russia, because I don't think they're fooled by the rhetoric and the bullying attitude. They can see that the United States is actually quite weak in a lot of critical areas, like their economy, and the fact that at least the non-nuclear military is turning out to be a thin shell. Okay. Sorry about all the coughing and clearing of the throat here. All right, so turning to the domestic politics, and I know we had so many calls, I'm going to be taking a lot of this stuff into tomorrow's talking points here. Last night, Donald Trump was down there in Houston, Texas, at the Toyota Center Arena, 18,000 seating. It was absolutely jam-packed of supporters of Trump and Ted Cruz, and a huge crowd outside that just stretched down the street. I guess people just wanted to be there, even if they couldn't actually get inside. And apparently, Donald Trump, along with talking about the migrant horde, has announced that he will reveal a 10% tax cut for the middle class before November. Obviously, a midterm election promise, and so we'll see. You know, it's another case of say what the voters want to hear. Seems to be working, though, because a new NBC Wall Street Journal poll is showing Trump's approval bouncing to an all-time high. Now, the Democrats are out there campaigning, and they're really sending an image that I think is going to work against them. Because down in Georgia, a photo emerged yesterday that showed Stacey Abrams, who's the Democratic candidate for governor, burning the state's flag. And I don't think that's good optics. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we were talking about how some of the Democratic candidates, the optics are turning bad. And as another example, over in Arizona, Representative Kyrsten Sinema is a Democrat running for the U.S. Senate. She's openly bisexual. She's backed by this population control group called Population Connection Action Fund, which has an agenda of taxing to the hilt families that engage in irresponsible breeding. And unfortunately, an interview has surfaced from 2006 with the nightlife magazine 944, in which she basically accused stay-at-home moms of leeching off their husbands. And so Kirsten basically said these women who act like staying at home, leeching off their husbands or boyfriends, or just cashing the checks is some sort of feminism because they're choosing to live that life. And that's bull. I mean, what the blank are we really talking about here? So that one's going to come back and haunt her. I don't think women are going to like that very much. Okay, Judicial Watch and the Daily Caller News Foundation once again are having to sue the Department of Justice, which is stonewalling Freedom of Information Act lawsuits. And they're suing now for all of the Comey memos of conversations with Obama, Clinton, and Schumer. Just trying to dig that stuff out. Now, if the Democrats do take the House in the midterms, or steal the House in the midterms, the congressional investigations will get shut down. But fortunately, we have Judicial Watch. They are not under the control of the government or politics, and they're going to keep going. Later this week, Rod Rosenstein and Papadopoulos are going to give closed-door testimony to the House committees regarding the Trump FBI probe. And it's all very hush-hush. Rosenstein made all kinds of demands about being in a special isolated room that is radio waves would not be able to get in or out of, and that only the top leadership be there. In fact, they had a list of members of Congress that they wouldn't testify in front of. So it's only going to be 4 members of the committee that are in there. Apparently, over at Robert Mueller's lawsuit against this Russian company operated by Yevgeny Prigozhin, who's an ally of Putin, and it's called Concord Management and Consulting. And Mueller indicted them last February. It's gone to trial, and it's reached the point where the judge in the case, Judge Friedrich, is saying to Mueller, it's time to put up or shut up, okay? You've been here in the court just making all these accusations and allegations. There's no proof. And it's time to basically make good on all of your claims, or it's time to basically throw this thing out. So Mueller is not doing very well, and apparently, according to Politico, it looks like Mueller's overall investigation is going to shut down. And there was an article at Politico saying, Mueller report, PSA, prepare for disappointment. Basically saying that everybody who's been lighting candles on their St. Mueller altars in their hopes that Trump would be removed from office, they're going to be dashed to the floor. After all those months and all that money, they found nothing. And even though Mueller has no official deadline to complete his work, people are already leaving the office. They're eager to just wrap up and get out of there, including Mueller. He's tired of trying to make this work. So we'll see what happens there. Now, former Hillary Clinton spokesman Philippe Rins has joined the chorus of Democratic voices saying that it's okay to confront Republicans in public. Just go on out there, and saying it's the First Amendment. No, it isn't. The First Amendment does not cover violence. Read that First Amendment. It guarantees us a right to peacefully assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. And it guarantees us freedom of speech. It doesn't say anything about freedom of violence. So, and another article, this one from uns.com, the Proud Boys are openly being persecuted. And it's basically showing that street fighting has arrived in America between the political extremes. And twice recently, in Charlottesville last year and in Portland, Oregon a couple of weeks ago, we've seen the municipal police forces deliberately stood down by their political superiors so that Antifa could control the streets. And then the corporate media find ways to frame all of the violence as somebody else's fault, or just ignore it and portray Antifa as the victims. Oh, they're the victims. They're simply reacting to decades of whatever it is they're supposed to be reacting to here. Meanwhile, over in Liz Warren land, apparently during her Sunday debate against challenger Jeff Deal, Warren came up with yet another new reason why she took a DNA test and went public with it. And she said basically that she took the DNA test to help rebuild trust in the U.S. government. Nice try, Liz. That one cratered. Basically showed that you had been lying all along, and that is not how you build trust. The other day we were talking about how down in Texas, the Texas Democratic Party was mailing out absentee ballot request forms to illegal immigrants, and the citizenship box was already checked. Yes, I'm a citizen. That caused a bit of a stink. And now apparently they've been caught sending voter registration applications to dead people. Excuse me, I got the hiccups again. To dead people. One woman who died 29 years ago. Now, up in New Hampshire, a judge has barred a law that requires some voters to present proof of residency when they register to vote, saying it would lengthen the lines at polling places and make it difficult for students, disabled voters, and others to cast ballots. Now, what's really at stake here is, if you've looked at New England, it's a small place, a lot of little tiny states, the original colonies, and there had been a previous issue where people had been living in New Hampshire and they would move to Vermont or to Maine or to Massachusetts, just over the border, and they would register to vote there. And then during the elections, they would vote in those states that they'd moved to. Then they would dash back across the border to vote in New Hampshire where they were still registered. And so Republicans caught them doing this, and they got a law passed saying you have to show residency, that you actually are a resident of the state before you can register to vote here. And this judge just struck that down. So again, this is going to be crooked election. Now, there's a little bit of good news out there. As you know, early voting has started in 25 states. And the early voting is showing there is a very large Republican turnout, much larger than the Democrats. So that's a good sign. It's a good sign. Republicans are fired up. The base is fired up, whether it's Donald Trump or what happened at Kavanaugh. They're getting on out there and they are voting. And the Democrats may be dispirited by all this nonsense that's been going on. As I referenced earlier in the show, apparently somebody left a suspicious package in the mailbox at George Soros' New York home. An employee of the house opened the package. It did not detonate, but it looked to be an explosive device. So the employee placed the package in a nearby wooded area and alerted the authorities. And so now they're conducting an investigation, and the case has been handed over to the Joint Terrorism Task Force Division of the FBI. Now, we have talked before about the fact that there are paid protesters. And there's an article in the Los Angeles Times that says paid protesters are real, and they're reporting on a lawsuit filed by a Czech investor against a business rival. And it basically has put the spotlight on the seedy and very real business of people hired to express fake outrage, support, and everything in between. So, according to the lawsuit, Prague-based investment manager Pavel Krupa hired Beverly Hills company Crowds on Demand to stage a protest near another investor's home, Zdeněk Bakala. And in the Bakala case, Crowds on Demand is accused of spreading misinformation through a website, putting on the protest, and organizing a phone and email campaign targeting several U.S. institutions with ties to Bakala. So there's now a $23 million, basically amounted to extortion. And by the way, this Crowds on Demand is tied to Anthony Weiner. Apparently they've done business before. Story coming out of Blacklisted News here. The U.S. corporate media refuses to inform the public when its commentators and pundits are paid foreign agents. Well, we've already been aware that on a lot of these corporate shows, they will have so-called experts on various issues, Iraq, foreign affairs in general, these other countries, the military, without mentioning that these guests and these experts are actually employed by companies in the military-industrial complex who have an agenda to push. Well, apparently the same thing is happening with foreign agents who are being paid. And so it really is all just constant manure. And last week, Glenn Greenwald highlighted how the Washington Post allowed Saudi lobbyists to regularly write opinion pieces. And when that scandal broke, the Washington Post had to force these writers to break off their financial relationships with the Saudis. So, U.S. corporate media, the best news that money can buy. And let's see what's going on here. Okay. Over in San Francisco, they have come to what they hope will be a resolution on this Bayer-Monsanto lawsuit. Bayer probably should have done more due diligence before they bought Monsanto, because they're looking at a major liability loss. And Bayer stock took a major dip today because the judge has upheld the Monsanto verdict, but she did slash the punitive damages from $289 million down to just $78 million, and told the plaintiff, Dwayne Lee Johnson, if he rejected that smaller payout, she would order a complete retrial. Now, the jurors are appalled. They thought they did the right thing. They thought they were sending a message to Monsanto that you can't knowingly put out a dangerous product and withhold the fact that it's dangerous from the consumer, which is a message I wish the corporations would learn. But for some reason, and I'm not going to speculate, the judge let Monsanto off with what, for a company of their size, amounts to a wrist slap. Story coming out of CNBC. Auto dealers are seeing slowing sales, sparking fears that a long-expected decline is here. And they're talking about the dealerships here in the United States of America. Well, we have been seeing that for a long time here in Hawaii. Down here at the bottom of the hill, we have this old, what used to be a 4-screen drive-in movie theater. And then for a while, it was a flea market, which we used to like to go to. Right now, it's being used as an overflow lot for Oahu's car dealers. and it is absolutely jam-packed full. And even worse, the land has now been sold, and they're going to be putting up a large building there. So where they're going to put the cars, I don't know. But it has been slowing. And I'm sure that the steel tariffs driving up the price of an average new car by $7,000 isn't going to help. That's going to put probably more focus on the pre-owned cars, which when I was a kid we called used cars. But it is a slowdown. The economy is slowing down. All the wrong things are being done in service to politics, in service to the war, in service to Wall Street and Israel. All the wrong decisions are being made. And we're seeing this consumer slowdown. We're seeing it with the closure of these iconic stores. Stores we grew up with. Stores like Sears, they're in trouble. They're in bankruptcy. Toys R Us is gone. And it's happening right in front of us. And corporate media is trying to pretend everything is fine. We're going to tell you everything is wonderful because we don't want the American people marching on Washington, D.C. with flaming torches and pitchforks, ropes, and rails. Meanwhile, Jim Rickards is warning that as the midterms approach, the markets could get more volatile. Okay, we have a caller on the line, Mark in Los Angeles. And Mark, I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. What is on your mind?
That's fine, Mike. I listen to you a day behind. I'm a YouTube fan. So whatever the topic is you're talking about today, I'm still like, I'm on yesterday. But real quick, the Second Amendment and just what's going on, there is no more law. The Second Amendment has been broken a long time ago. The Constitution is literally kind of just been, it's shredded, and some of us romantically kind of just hang on, hoping that there's some hope, that some glimmer that it may have some life in it and still survive.
Well, I think it'll have life in it following the collapse of the current government, Soviet Union style. We, the American people, can bring it back. There'll have to be some modifications, obviously, and probably a lot of new things added to it. Anyway,
Mike,
listen.
I
Mark,
love you for
stay
that.
On the line.
Go ahead.
Stay on the line. I'm going to put you on hold, and we'll be back after these commercials.
Okay.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Last segment of the program today. We're finishing up with Mark in Los Angeles. And Mark, I agree with you. One of the most frustrating things that the American people are having to deal with is we're still trying to play by the rules, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights against a government which is increasingly going outlaw. And again, looking at the way the Democrats are openly bringing in illegal immigrants to vote for them, which is against the law. Yeah, they've gone outlaw.
Yeah. Remember what you said about the Kennedy assassinations? Like there may be, you're sure it's obvious that there are multiple motives and multiple entities that may have, or had something to do with, or had something to gain from that. The same is going on with this stampede, what I call it.
Yes.
This is a psyop kind of a thing that's been going on for years. I mean, we can thank everything from Hillary's denial of her husband's exploits to Obama's aloof arrogance and Black Lives Matter and the way the cops stand down when people would block freeways and everything else. That sends a signal to all of them, and they're like, "Oh, that's how it's done, huh? We just storm stuff and just stampede and take what we want. Oh, we get it." And it's on. It's like it becomes a snowball effect. And here in California, man, we're toast. because there is no real kind of any kind of tactical sort of unity. So as soon as things happen, you know how it goes with the tribalism and racial groups and the gangs and everything else. Everybody's gonna it's just gonna be a powder keg, and I'd have to say, man, I love you, and I will call again. And it's okay to disagree. The Soviet-style collapse that you talk about, that's what we said, okay, I can't take it, I got to call. Mike, it may be a Soviet-style collapse, but there will be a bunch of little skirmishes. This civil war that you dearly try to avoid on a daily basis with your show and your commentary, this civil war that you preach against, it's going to happen. And the sad thing is, it's going to be very unorganized, and countrymen will be shooting at countrymen, and there will be racial divide. You know how easy it is to put a provocateur in any group and then divide that group. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, and can you imagine me, a biracial guy in the San Fernando Valley, low riding all my life, a drug criminal record, whatever, but I'm an adult now and I love my country and I love, you know what I'm saying? Imagine me trying to preach peace on my block when stuff hits the fan. I'm toast because I'm not armed. But I got bow and arrows and I can make things and I will do whatever I can to defend everybody on my block, and that's the wrong attitude to have when this thing kicks off, and it's going to kick off. And I plead, our only hope is with military and law enforcement.
Okay, well, Mark, I got to let you go. We're at the end of the show.
But I love you, but thank you, Mike.
All right. So it's the end of the show here. Everybody stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got a lot of interesting things to share with you. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. I hate constantly having to ask for money, but it is necessary and greatly, greatly appreciated. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.